Hello everyone, I'm Stephane Benichou. I'm the CEO and co-founder of INTHEBOARDROOM, a transaction advisory service in Paris. We are specialized in transactions at the intersections of sports, media and entertainment, and I'm very happy to have a conversation with Antonio today. We really witness a real difference between the sports in the US and the sport market in Europe. In the US, it feels like sport is an industry, it's an asset class that is creating wealth, that is creating value for the investors, for the athletes, for the leagues and for the clubs. And sometimes it feels like in Europe we are lagging a bit behind, even though we have some of the best teams and best athletes and best brands. So can you walk us through maybe your mission at Apex and how do you capture this opportunity in Europe?
Yeah, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Great event, and obviously great to share the stage. I think that's a good question. And obviously for us, it screams opportunity. We focus here because we're from here, but at the end of the day, if you look at the United States, sports is a business. It's entertainment. In Europe, it's religion, it's culture. Hence, when you look at eyeballs, when you look at engagement, there's much bigger numbers here on this side of the pond. Now, as in many things, we're a couple of years behind the United States, and when it comes to running and organizing sports as a business, then obviously Europe hasn't been doing the right things, and that's exactly what we want to change. We believe that sports is becoming more and more of an asset class. It's a global platform, and it's a sector that will only grow no matter what happens in the world on a technological or AI standpoint or a geopolitical standpoint. So having that macro understanding of where sports is and where sports can go as an asset class, we believe that the opportunity is definitely in Europe. But to invest in Europe the right way, you need to understand how fans at the end of the day ultimately consume sports, and you need to be the perfect bridge between the good learnings of the United States as a business and bringing certain elements of that, particularly again around the structure of a lot of these leagues and these teams, but also the entertainment piece, the hospitality piece, and bring that to Europe, but always being conscious of what it is that makes certain sports that we have here so big, and you need to be able to retain that fan base, but also speak to a new generation that will look at and consume sports ultimately in a different way.
Yeah, you mean through the format of the content and how do sports adapt to maybe a new demographic of audience? So it creates opportunities for legacy sports to convert and to basically produce content that is palatable to younger audiences, but it leaves the way also to emerging sports league to be created and to offer a new product. Are you active in the emerging sport leagues field?
Yes, we've done, well, one of our flagship investments is actually in the United States, but it's a golf league called TGL. Well, we invested in the holding that owns and operates that league, but effectively they saw an opportunity with golf, and they saw that there was a sport with a lot of heritage, but definitely lacking a good media product, and it's effectively a solution to that. We have now also recently invested in NFL's professional flag football league, so obviously around football and all the history of what American football is, but seeing flag as a way to capture younger generations, women, and just different demographics that the NFL has tapped historically, and obviously creating an emerging concept around it, and obviously that's something that we believe is exciting. But just kind of as a step back, with again focusing in Europe, we want to be and continue the path of being a leading sports investor in Europe because of our roots, because of our DNA, and that's really our mission. So even when we invest in a lot of these emerging companies in the United States, we start to look at Europe and see what ideas can we generate, and then what can we look at certain sports here, from football to tennis, whatever that may be, and can we be inspired by a lot of these learnings and these concepts and kind of adapt in more of a European way, and what are the best operators to back effectively in being disruptive, being innovative, and that's effectively our mission, and it's a combination of playing the United States as a learning platform, and obviously as a successful one, and bringing that to Europe.
We're completely aligned. I completely see also our strategy of the learning platform in the US, because at the end of the day, they built a very robust sport industry, an investable asset class, with at the end sports that they are mainly watching and playing themselves and not the rest of the world. So it's very interesting to see this value creation capacity they have in the US and to import the best practices. Of course, with the adaptation of the cultural needs that we have, we will not all become, all sports in Europe might not become just an NBA game, but there will be some cultural adaptation, I think, at the end. One thing that we see also in many of the, let's say, transactions in the US involving US investors is their access to, first, a pool of very diverse investors. You will find family offices, of course, high net worth, PE funds, specialized funds, and also credit holders and institutional money. In Europe, do you see the same ecosystem of potential pool of money? Do you see the same attractiveness of the sport asset class towards these investors, or is it more limited and maybe not mature enough?
Definitely much more limited. It's changing. 5 years ago, there's conversations we have with European LPs that we wouldn't. So today, sorry, conversations we have that we wouldn't have 5 years ago, but definitely far behind that level of capital, that professionalization of capital, and that willingness to effectively take sports business risk. There's still obviously a lot of element, particularly on the older generations of European wealth management, let's say, or capital management, that is still very embedded in the history of what it is to own sports, right? You do it for other reasons other than profit, for legacy or for marketing purposes or for, whatever, other things other than, again, driving profitability and just understanding that it's an asset class that can be very successful. And because of that, there's definitely still resistance, which is, you just need to know how to navigate. But as I said, it's changing. I think a lot of our early investors were some of the world's best athletes and some very strong high net worth individuals from Europe that have obviously demonstrated and are paving the path. Corporates like Red Bull have invested in our funds. So obviously, again, on the corporate standpoint, you see, but on the more generational wealth and institutional capital perspective, definitely Europe still is behind and lacks a little bit of bolts, let's say.
And maybe another indication that maybe you can react on is the fact that, so you mentioned your investment in flag football in the US. How many other European investors are into flag football today, apart from you?
That we were the only ones approved by the NFL, and obviously that was also a big sense of pride on our side, and just a recognition, right? The NFL is definitely a very powerful business and league. They set the rules in what they want, so they're very selective when it comes to approving partners and understanding what value they can bring to the table. And I think they understood our international position and what we can do beyond what others, maybe US investors, can do. And again, one of the ambitions with Flag, as I said, is reach new audiences, and the international audience is definitely an opportunity, and they recognize that. So yeah, that's one of the advantages we play. On the other side, when it comes to Europe, again, as I was saying, on a fundraising perspective, it might be a bit tougher, but on the other hand, it's a much less competitive landscape when it comes to deployment, and that is great. Our challenges in deploying in Europe is just sometimes figuring out the right structures and just the right set of governance and agreement, but it's never bidding war. It's never a valuation standpoint. So obviously, that's, as an investor, that's great.
And so it's interesting because the conversation today is around the blind corners of investing in PE in Europe, in sports. We've just described the ecosystem that is different from the US, where I think there is no longer a blind corner of investment in sports in the US. Everything is enlightened now. But in Europe, we've covered the ecosystem and maybe the fact also that the available pool of money is not the same. Also that the governance is not envisaged the same in Europe rather than in the US. And the fact that today you are one of the only structured PE fund investing only in sports in Europe and from Europe. Now, if we were to maybe shed some light on some of the blind corners you find in Europe, and maybe if we could have a positive message towards other funds who would like to come into sports, or professional investors looking to maybe go further, what would you say would be the next investment thesis that you could develop or that could be of interest for you in Europe, given already maybe the difficulties that we've just mentioned?
I think I mean, I cannot say too much as well. There's some things I can say, but I think the mid market, think 50 to 500 million enterprise value, professional sports landscape is very interesting, particularly again operated by Europeans in Europe. If you're able to understand and back the right operators in sports, that you've built a macro thesis. So we've built thesis around certain sports. I mean, we're very, we've got a lot of background in racing. We've done investment in Formula One. We're looking at now adjacencies or other racing categories, racket sports in general. Again, looking at the professional side. So I think tennis is in an exciting moment. Cycling. So again, generally sports in Europe, when it comes to Europe, sports that have heritage, that have history, legacy, an initial fan base to tap on, but just have been under commercialized or under monetized, generally speaking, or operated in not such an efficient way, don't integrate technology the way that they should. I mean, basic things, there's a lot of opportunities out there. So yeah, I think that's really where the opportunity is, and I think there's room for a lot of other investors. So we will definitely welcome many more investors. I think that would just be beneficial for the sector as a whole.
So there is still a lot of room to grow in Europe. There are still some valuable assets that are maybe under-monetized that you could maybe develop while respecting the cultural heritage. Can we say that?
Yes, I think that's a mistake that many investors that have come in sports have done, particularly in Europe, is when they want to take full control, and particularly on the sporting side. And this coming from us, that we are backed by so many sports people, and we understand sports, and we are the first to recognize that operating a sporting product is a very specific thing. And we're not the best to do that. We are the best partners on an operator that has done that has demonstrated a great job in doing that, and we help them in running a business, because sometimes they have an amazing IP in their hands and they don't recognize, or they think it's tapped to what they've known, and there's so much more to be done. So I think that is the model. I don't want to give too much out of our secret sauce, but I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, I think having more investors side by side will only benefit the ecosystem, and obviously that will also benefit us as well.
Before we move on to the sports growth fund that you develop in these days, I'd be very happy if you could maybe develop on what you've been doing with Alpine, with your investment in Formula One, with your investment in football, with some very emblematic brands, and that have been successful, of course, on the field, on the tracks, but also commercially. I mean, we can see the before and after. So maybe could you walk us through maybe one example of how you managed to help or contribute to develop one brand, one asset in Europe through this path of, let's say, better financial sustainability, and also it translates into strategic, right? It's not just the quest of money, it's also the quest for expanding the footprint, expanding the audience, and expanding the success of the team or the asset. So I'd be happy to know how you managed to, or maybe your experience in doing so with one of the brands that you invested in.
Yeah, I think Alpine and our investment in Alpine, and I speak on behalf of the investment group and obviously even of Otro Capital, which is the American fund that kind of structured and led that transaction we were part of. The recognition there was, again, a very strong European Formula One manufacturer with a French brand, right? A French corporate with all the good and the bad that come with. And what I think we understood was that Alpine as a brand, particularly in the United States, was very much under-commercialized. And, I think all this market in the United States that Liberty unlocked, Alpine was not tapping into. Everyone knows Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren in the States, and nobody really knew Alpine. And there's only, well, now 11, but there's only 10, 11 teams on the grid. So to build a brand, you don't need to be winning. Obviously, it helps to be winning. So we saw that there was an opportunity to partner up with Renault and effectively to build a brand with Alpine and focus a bit more again on the US market, particularly on the commercial, on the sponsorship side. So that was effectively that was a story that the group agreed with Renault, and we took our stake and our governance to commercialize the brand and to bring different things. And when we invested, we announced a lot of athletes straight away, Rory McIlroy, Anthony Joshua, Patrick Mahomes, Sasha Zverev, so a lot of big household names that would bring a lot of relevance to Alpine as a brand, as a team. And I think slowly we started to see that being reflected in sponsorship dollars, particularly in the United States. But even things like what was announced yesterday with Gucci coming in as a naming partner is quite unique and quite disruptive. So yeah, that is definitely a good example of what can be done with certain European properties.
And it's very nice to see that there is a French sports brand invested by European capital that is able to also attract US viewers and international viewers and have sometimes success on the field. So it's a great story all in all, because it's reversing a bit let's say the flow coming from the US to Europe, and it's great to know that we have also some very good brands to build on in Europe that are still meaningful for the audience in Europe or Asia. Now, so we've uncovered a few of the blind spots of PE investing in Europe. We've seen that the ecosystem is not ready, and that maybe you don't have yet a lot of fellow funds coming up, but that you feel there is still room to grow. So can you maybe walk us through what you plan to do with the Sports Growth Fund at Apex? Because I think what you target and the size and also the strategy is very interesting in this context that we just described.
Yeah, I think I've touched upon that a bit, but it's definitely the small mid-cap PE landscape with a bit more focus in Europe, by just finding the best operators in sports that we identified that have been really under-commercialized, and we can come in and help there. That's I would say the core focus of the fund. We leave a small percentage as well for some larger stuff where we are happy to be a bit more passive, as we did with flag football, right? The particular emerging or transactions that we think that we can be the international investor in the cap table, get a lot of learning experiences, but also really underwrite growth returns. So there's a room for that, but the big bulk of investing is really backing the best operators under this small mid-cap professional sports landscape.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Antonio. It was great discussing with you as always. And let's maybe continue the conversation afterwards if you have questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.